The following visionary leaders inspired the creation of the European Union we live in today. Without their energy and motivation, we would not be living in the sphere of peace and stability that we take for granted. From resistant fighters to lawyers, the founding fathers were a diverse group of people who held the same ideals: a peaceful, united and prosperous Europe. In 1945, Europe was in ruins. A post-World War era, Europe saw a need for a federation to promote peace and unity. They also wanted to present a collective front against the threat of communism during the Cold War. The idea was to tie themselves so the future wars will be impossible. So, 6 countries, Germany, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg, signed so-called European Coal and Steel Community. The European Union is set up with the aim of ending the frequent and bloody wars between neighbors, which culminated in the Second World War. This community begins to unite Europe countries economically and politically in order to secure lasting peace. These years are dominated by a Cold War between East and West. Protests in Hungary against the communist regime are put down by Soviet tanks, while the following year the Soviet Union takes the lead in the space race when it launches the first man-made space satellite. After that, the Treaty of Rome creates the European Economic Community of Common Market. The 1960s sees the emergence of youth culture, with groups such as Beatles attracting huge crowds of teenage fans wherever they appear, helping to stimulate a cultural revolution and widening the generation gap. They also agree joint control over food production, so that everybody now has enough to eat, and soon there is even surplus agricultural produce. May 1968 becomes famous for student riots in Paris, and many changes in society and behavior become associated with the so-called 68 generation.
Denmark, Ireland and the United Kingdom joined the European Union on the 1st January 1973, raising the number of member states to 9. The short Arab-Israel War of October 1973 resulted in an energy crisis and economic problems in Europe. The European Parliament increases its influence in EU affairs, and in 1979 all citizens can, for the first time, elect their members directly.
In 1980s, there was a chain of great events in Europe, such as Greece becomes the 10th member of the EU. Spain and Portugal follow 5 years later. The 1986 the Single European Act is signed. The single market is created. The Berlin Wall is pulled down and the border between East and West Germany is opened for the first time in 28 years. This leads to the reunification of Germany when both East and West Germany are united. In 1993, the EU, as we know, is emerged and offered the EU citizens a common visa, a common legislative and judicial body, a common voting rights, a common currency. The euro was also established. The euro is the new currency for many Europeans. The name euro was officially adopted on 16th of December 1995. The euro was introduced to world financial markets as an accounting currency on 1st January 1999. A small village in Luxembourg gave its name to the Schengen agreements that gradually allow people to travel without having their passport checked at the borders. The Schengen area is the area comprising 26 European countries that have abolished passport and any other type of border control at their common borders, also referred to as internal borders. It mostly functions as a single country for international travel purposes with a common visa policy. The area is named after the Schengen Agreement.
22 of the 28 European Union member states participate in the Schengen area. Of the 6 EU members that do not form part of the Schengen area, 4 are legally obliged and wish to join the area, while the other 2 maintain opt-outs. All 4 European Free Trade Association member states have signed agreements on association with the Schengen Agreement, even though they are outside the EU. In addition, 3 European microstates can be considered de facto participants. The Schengen area currently has a population of over 400 million people on an enormous territory. Millions of young people study in other countries with EU support.
11 September 2001 becomes synonymous with the war of terror after hijacked airlines are flown into buildings in New York and Washington. EU countries begin to work much more closely together to fight crime. The political divisions between East and West Europe are finally declared healed when no fewer than 10 new countries joined the EU in 2004, followed by 2 more in 2007. A financial crisis hit the global economy in September 2008, leading a closer economic cooperation between EU countries. The European Parliament is an important forum for political debate and decision-making at the EU level. The members of the European Parliament are directly elected by voters in all member states to represent people's interests with regard to EU lawmaking and to make sure other EU institutions are working democratically.
Over the years, the Parliament has acquired substantial legislative and budgetary powers that allow it to sit together with the representatives of the governments of the member states in the Council, the direction in which the European project is heading. In doing so, the Parliament has sought to promote democracy and human rights, not only in Europe, but also throughout the world. What is the capital of the EU? Brussels in Belgium is considered the de facto capital of the European Union, having a long history of hosting the institutions of the European Union within its European headquarters. The EU has no official capital and no plans to declare one, but Brussels hosts the official seats of the European Commission, Council of the European Union, and European Council.
The EU was not always as big as it is today. When European countries started to cooperate economically in 1951, only Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands participated. Over time, more and more countries decided to join. The Union reached its current size of 28 member countries. Besides, there are some countries on the road to EU membership, and there are some potential candidates. Becoming a member of the EU is a complex procedure which does not happen overnight. Once an applicant country meets the conditions for membership, it must implement EU rules and regulations in all areas. While some countries are eager to be member state of EU, Great Britain is thinking about leaving it. So, what is Brexit? Have you ever heard about such phenomenon as Brexit? It is the idea that British people may vote to leave the EU and to be the first country to do so. The British government, with the Prime Minister David Cameron, has been renegotiating its relationship with Europe, and deal has done of thoughts that it would return sovereignty to London. It would also limit the right of migrants to claim benefits in the UK. But it's highly controversial. Other EU countries also want something out of this deal. Everybody says that they want Britain to be in, but the British people are not pretty sure that they want to be a part of EU anyway, although there are strong commercial reasons to stay in Europe. but the Brits don't like their social bit. So, in the next 18 months, British people will get a chance to vote on the referendum. If they vote to leave them, Brexit becomes a reality, and things get very messy.
Relationships between Ukraine and the European Union are currently shaped through the European Neighbourhood Policy, a foreign policy instrument of the EU designed for the countries it borders. The EU is seeking an increasingly close relationship with Ukraine, going beyond cooperation to gradual economic integration and deepening of political cooperation. The decision to put off signing the association agreement led to pro-EU Euromaidan movement. This led to the removal of Yanukovych and his government by parliament after Ukrainian revolution in February 2014. Since then, Ukraine has been striving towards integration into the European Union, and portions of eastern Ukrainian regions near the Russian border engage in war in Donbass. The political part of the association agreement was signed on 21 March 2014. The economic part of the Ukraine-European Union Association Agreement was signed on 27 June 2014 by the new president, Petro Poroshenko, who described this as Ukraine's first but most decisive step toward EU membership. Poroshenko also set 2020 as a target for the EU membership application. In January 1st, 2016, Ukraine joined the deep and comprehensive free trade area with the EU. President of the European Council described the signing as a great day for Europe.
The new decade starts with a severe economic crisis, but also with the hope that investments in new green and climate-friendly technologies and closer European cooperation will bring lasting growth and welfare. During the last years, the EU flourished. It has the largest population in the world, which ranks them third, after China and India. The EU is currently one of the top economies, with almost $16 trillion in GDP, and in 2012, the EU won the Nobel Peace Prize for the strengthened nation from the continent of war to the continent of peace.